Hello, everybody. I'm David Perez, retired police officer from East Windsor, New Jersey, and here to introduce and welcome Ryan Burke to the power of our story. Ryan served 6.5 years in the Air Force and is currently an active duty police officer in South Carolina. He is passionate about educating law enforcement on mental, spiritual, physical health, and is, which is, we all know, is a constant battle to maintain, and is working on implementing mental and spiritual health for those starting out in the academy, along with active duty police officers, to create awareness and be given the tools and motivation to deal with their arena as they are faced with daily trauma. So Ryan, welcome. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and we look forward to hearing you.
Oh, I appreciate you all having me. I know most of you as it is already, so thank you for tuning in. Scott, appreciate you being here as well. You know, it's been a while since I talked to you. So my journey is a little bit more unique than most of y'all because I'm still currently in law enforcement. So therefore my battle and my, way to maintain the stress and maintain mental and spiritual health is ongoing. So I'll kind of start here from the beginning. Is that 2015, 2016, I went through the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy and got certified here in the state of South Carolina as a law enforcement officer. Was, typical new officer, feeling high and mighty and happy and motivated and wanted to get out and catch drug dealers and, get in car chases and run after people and, everything that a new officer experiences, and all that motivation. So graduated the academy in 2016, got out, went back to my agency and started my field training. Went through my field training with no issues, got to see some interesting things while in field training. Got out of field training Memorial Weekend 2016. Was feeling good, in my car by myself, cruising around, just ready to go out and handle business. And I remember this day very vividly. It was that Saturday, 2016 Memorial Weekend, was my first day cut loose back into a solo unit by myself in the car, handling calls by myself. And came on shift about 6 o'clock. Sun was still up. It was real hot that weekend. And first call of the night, tones drop over the radio. And it was my zone, so I get dispatched to it. And it was for a unresponsive, not breathing child. And I get there. It was in that apartment complex. Was not our greatest apartment complexes in jurisdiction. And we came to find that a 7-year-old child had drowned in the pool that was not open yet. So me being the new guy, of course, I get tasked with all the crappy details throughout the call. And I have to ride the ambulance with this child down to the hospital downtown Charleston. And hours later, we determined that this child had passed. That call hit me like a truck. And I found that, I couldn't understand the why, and I think in law enforcement, we always want to try and find out the why. Why did you do this? Why did you hurt this person? Why did you this? The why was usually what we always was taught to help with the court side, I guess you could say. I wanted to know the why. I couldn't figure out the why to why this kid was left alone by a pool in an apartment complex and him ending up dead because of lack of parental supervision or a lack of guardian supervision. So I took the next day off. Was like, hey, call my boss. I'm not coming in today. I need to regroup myself. And I was fortunate enough to where I had some of my bosses call me, hey, how you doing? But it was like the canned entry call, like, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? Do you need anything? Of course, I give the canned entry back. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'll see you tomorrow. I had one of my bosses actually unannounced show up to my apartment and say, "Get dressed, let's go. We're going to go do something." And we just ended up going to the local mall, walking around and catching a movie. But again, he's like, "Are you doing okay?" And again, "I'm fine. I'll see you tomorrow." So I packed that away. I didn't really talk about it. We never really debriefed about it. And then I learned weeks later that they never ended up charging the guardian, which really pissed me off. So now I'm mixing the emotions of the why with anger because somebody should have paid for this child's death. Well, like every law enforcement officer, life goes on. We put it away. I got it. I'm tough. I'm fine. And I moved on. And I was fine for a very, very long time, for a while. Summer of 2018 comes around. Mind you, now this is like I'm 2 years into law enforcement. I'm starting to really feel my groove, starting to figure things out as a cop, and I'm doing okay. Like my light bulb came on. Like, I know how to do this job. I can do this job, and I can do it well. And mind you, in that span, we had many different critical incidences that occurred. We had car chases that resulted in deaths. We had overdoses. We had other things, but like we never fully debriefed on anything in my agency, at this current agency I was at. Well, not the one I'm at now, but the one I was at during this time. And we just put it away. We talk about it. We laugh about it at the bar. You go, "Oh, hey, ha, 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 you're." But then summer of 2018 comes around and tones drop. It's about 9 o'clock at night, and we get a call for a burglary in progress. So me and my squad of 4 people, because it was a small town, the entire, everybody on duty, which is a massive 4 units, go rush into this trailer park. Again, not the greatest part about town. And we kind of break protocol, and we stack up at the door and hit the door. Instead of doing call outs and doing it all safe, we just bummed rush it like, Marines in Abu Dhabi. So, but we get in the trailer, and I was the first one in the stack, and I see this boy that looked a lot like this child who had drowned in 2016, except now this boy is covered in blood. He appears to have been beaten up severely with some sort of blunt weapon, and he's crying. Well, come to find out, the aunt who he was staying with was in mental crisis, believed that she was being raped by the child and beat him with a broomstick. So now all these emotions that I never unpacked from the past start coming up again. And again, I just say, "I'm fine. I got it. I'll be all right. Keep moving." And I was okay for a while again and kept on pushing. And then next thing I know, I get a call for a guy floating in that reservoir. Commandeer somebody's boat, because we didn't have a boat team in our department. Granted, 60% of our jurisdiction was water, so go figure, we didn't have a boat. And the missing person we had been looking for was now dead in the reservoir. And it just, once again, things simmer over, and I pack it away, don't unpack it ever again. At least that's what I thought. So as time passed, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that kid that drowned. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that kid that was hit with that broomstick. I couldn't close my eyes without finding that guy that we found dead in the reservoir. I realized that I couldn't decompress without seeing or rethinking or re-going through that natural death that resembled the dynamic of my family, or that, car crash where the pedestrian got hit when we were chasing the car thinking it was our fault, or anything that just was, whatever I went to was just triggering something, some other incident, bringing it back from the past. But like every other cop, I kept saying, I'm good. I can handle this. I'm a cop. This is what the job is. I just have to accept it. Convinced myself that. And I'll get to that in a little bit, but that was obviously the wrong way to approach things. But then life got better. 2017, I met my now current wife. We met through online. And then by 2018, we were engaged January 2018, actually right around the new year. We woke up New Year's Day after partying all night, New Year's Eve. And she goes, are you ever going to get me a ring? I said, let's go. And I brought her to the jewelry store and did the ballsy thing and said, pick one. Thank God she was within reason. And we picked out a ring and we got engaged. Life was good after that for a while. You know, I learned to kind of just, you know, separate work and home. And, you know, things were really good. You know, had a great support system. I ended up eventually getting on a great team to where we could start talking about things on work. My teammates and I at that time, we spent almost at least one day off, not every day off together as well. We were a true family. That was for sure. 2019, we bought a house and the wedding plans were coming into place for our wedding in June of 2019. But we all know COVID screws a lot of that up, and that's what happened there. Oh man. Then March of 2019 rolls around. Now, mind you, prior to March of 2019, my bosses pretty much pulled me in their office and said, hey, keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be the next corporal. We just have to get the funding and you'll be there. I said, great. So March 2019 comes around and I get pulled up to the Crystal Palace, as we called it, or the command staff carpet, and was put into an internal affairs investigation and later terminated under allegations of lying during an internal affairs investigation. And in the state of South Carolina, if you get terminated for any kind of misconduct violation, you can't work until that misconduct is cleared. So at that point, I felt like my life and my career was pretty much done. I wanted nothing to do with law enforcement. I pretty much everything that I personally owned in my law enforcement, you know, gear or equipment or whatever else I had thrown out. I said, I'm just going to get rid of it because I'm never going to use it again. That was obviously the wrong thing to do because I have now spent a lot of money trying to replace stuff. But fortunately, though, I have an electrician's background and I had a job 2 hours before I even turned my gear in. So I was lucky there. But the result of that investigation, I really had a severe sense of betrayal. I lost my sense of purpose. I lost my tribe as a law enforcement officer because, let's face it, if you're a cop, we all know it, you're a cop and you're part of that cool kids group until you're not. And once you're out of law enforcement, you're not in the cool kids group anymore, you know. And I felt like I couldn't do anything right. I was like, you know, and with that, it was a lot harder because my wife started sensing a lot of this, you know, anger and anxiety and depression in me, and it was affecting her. And she tried telling me how she was feeling and what she was going through her mind because she was feeling bad as a result of me. And it wasn't anything against me, but she was saying, I feel bad because you're doing this. I feel bad because you're doing that. And I was to the point to where I didn't want to hear it. It was, you know, I'm doing this to you. I can't do anything right for you. And it wasn't that. It's not that. It never will be that. But that's what I was hearing and that's what I was feeling because she was feeling bad and her feelings were hurt because of something I did. And that crushed me to begin with because I would never do anything to hurt my wife or to intentionally hurt my wife's feelings. And I would be short. I would be angry. I would yell, scream, you name it. I mean, that's what I was doing to her and to me. And it was to the point where she was ready to leave me. And that became an eye opener. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work on this. I got to fix this. My wife's ready to leave me. And for those of you who are married, a few of you in here have told me, you know, it's just a job and it's not worth your marriage. It's not worth doing something because, you know, it's not worth giving up your marriage over a job or over this. So I had a good job though. I was working with the IBW, the local electrical workers union down here. I was making money hand over fist, which was great, but I had no self-fulfillment. I had no self-purpose. I had no direction of where I wanted to go. And of course, during that time frame, which was about 9 months, I'm waiting for a decision from the academy to determine whether they were going to clear me of my misconduct or not too. And if you've been in law enforcement or any kind of internal affairs investigation, you know the worst thing you can do is just sit and wait for information. And you want to be informed. You want to know what's going on. You want to know where it's at. You want to know how long it's going to take. You want to know what they're thinking. And that wasn't happening, obviously, because nothing happens quickly with the state. And that was, you know, making things worse for me. And while I said to myself, I'm going to make things better, I got to do things better for my wife, I was actually getting worse and worse and worse. So to the point to where she was pretty much saying, I'm going to leave if you don't change. Well, fortunately for me, my wife still agreed to marry me. God bless her. I mean, I'm the lucky one, that's for sure. And November 2019, I get word back from my attorney through the academy that they've cleared me, that they have found me not guilty of misconduct, and my records regarding that misconduct will be expunged. So that was a small victory, but that small victory did not change anything in me. It just opened that door back up for me to go back to work as a law enforcement officer. So like any man, I'm stubborn. I'm not good with feelings. I don't like talking about feelings. I don't like talking about what's on my mind, or I don't like talking about, you know, showing any weakness or any vulnerability. But I said, I got to work on this. But like I said, I'm stubborn. So I said, I got to work on this, but did I really try and work on it? It came and went in waves. I went to counseling. Counseling only worked for so long until I felt like it wasn't. I got on medication. That only happened so long until I felt like the medication wasn't working. Back to counseling, did that for so long again. I was like, okay, this isn't working for me. And then in the midst of this, I get hired in my current agency. So I hit the reset button. I was like, okay, new slate, let's fix this. I reset, got hired on with my current agency, and things were going great. Went through my FTO, got onto my patrol team. I went to nights, which I was ecstatic for because that's where I wanted to be. Spent a month on patrol, and then because of my extensive traffic and DUI enforcement experience and training, I went straight to the traffic team. Spent 6 months on traffic. Stayed within the traffic unit. Went into the traffic safety grant position. Did not like it because it was a lot of pressure on that position to produce tickets. And if you've ever been on a grant position, it's the best and worst position in the department, in my opinion. Came out of traffic, went back to patrol, and then all of the stuff that I was not realizing that I was struggling with started to come back up again because I'm back on patrol. I'm back seeing the guy who shot himself in the head in front of his wife, or I'm back seeing the, sexual assault victim. I'm back seeing the child who is, hurt and needing help and has nobody to depend on. So while I was not as maybe angry or anxious or depressed, it was resonating back up. And my wife says to me, "You were good for a while, but you're right back to square one again." So I went round and round and round in that vicious circle of, because like I said, I'm a guy and I'm stubborn, and I'm going to help myself. Oh, I've helped myself. I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore. And then stop. And then back into the cycle. I need to go get help myself. Oh, I'm good. And I would stop. And it was a vicious cycle for me for a while. And it's something that I'm still constantly working on and battling, because I'm not 100% there yet, but I feel like I'm at least 180 degrees better than where I was a while ago. And it took to the point where, like, this last go around, where my wife was like, "If you don't fix yourself, I am leaving." And she showed me a suitcase pretty much. And I was on a weekend tour, so I was working a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was coming home, I believe it was on that Saturday. And I do remember very clearly that we had like 4 or 5 deaths for some reason that day. 3 of them were natural. I think 1 was an overdose and 1 suicide. And for some reason, they were all in my zone. And I remember driving home, and like I was telling Chris Gregorio at the beginning here, we get take-home cars. And I'm driving home, and I'm taking off my, halfway taking off my stuff, my gear on the way home, because, if you've been a cop longer than 6 months, you usually leave that trail of gear from your car to the upstairs bedroom. And I get to a red light, and I take a deep breath, and I found myself just bawling my eyes out for no reason. I couldn't figure out why. And I eventually got home, and it was kind of awkward at first, because I'm driving home and I got to another intersection, and this, I don't even remember if it was a man or a woman, looks at me and just gives me that look of concern. And I think they were kind of caught off guard, that they looked over and they just saw this like overwhelming amount of emotion coming out of a cop in his car on his way home. But I gathered myself, and I really started to think long and hard, what is wrong with me? And what do I got to do to make myself better? And what do I got to do to make myself a better husband? And it took about a day and a half of thinking, and I realized, like, and I've had conversations in the past with my FTOs from my old agency, some of my best friends from my old agency, and they all said the same thing, and they all went through the same thing, is that they were angry because they had PTSD, that they would be snappy and they would be yelling, screaming for no reason for stuff. Little things would just set them off, And I started to think really long and hard about that. And I started to think, like, okay, does this make me mad? What am I getting home and I get snappy about? Oh, dishes in the sink. But then I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about it like, I tell these people at work when they get mad at stuff, like, in the grand scheme of things, is it really that big of a deal? And they all say no all the time. And I was like, I really need to start practicing what I preach to these people on the street, because obviously I truly care about the people I serve. So I need to truly care about myself and take my own advice. So I started taking that concept and applying it. And it's kind of like taught me, like, hey, take that breath before I get crazy about something that's not really a big deal. And then I got on LinkedIn, because I was like, I got to a point where I was like, maybe I need to be out of law enforcement. Maybe I need to look at something and take my talents elsewhere. And one of the first people I actually connected with was Scott. and Scott and I started talking, and I've had the pleasure to meet Scott. He's a author of 2 books. Yes, I said books because every time it seems like I talk to somebody in this group, they're like, "Oh, I got a book for you." So yes, I said books. And I started thumbing through Scott's books, and it really kind of hit home. It really, started talking about like everything that Scott talks about in his books, or like tips he gives us in one of his, his tips book. It's like, wow, I'm not the only one. And then I connect with Sarah, and I connect with David, and I connect with Chris, and I connect with all of y'all, and I start listening in on this, and I'm like, I'm not the only one. So I hear what you guys say, and I start applying that knowledge and that stuff that you guys say, or are saying that you guys gone through, and it makes sense. Like, it's not necessarily like that I needed counseling or I needed to, get on medication, which I absolutely hated, by the way. But it was being able to just put out what you went through, how you felt during it, and why you felt that way, and putting out that just getting that stuff out there and saying, hey, I went through this, have you gone through something like this, and talking about it, and putting that awareness out there. And I'm becoming more self-aware about coming home and maybe sinks full of dishes, because that's my job in the house, which I hate doing dishes, but again, that's my job in the house. So, there's dishes in the sink, and I'm just like, but I'm not trying to get crazy about it, or I got to vacuum and the house needs to be vacuumed. And I come home from work and I'm like, damn, the house has to be vacuumed, but I'm not getting snappy about it. I'm just kind of like, all right, I know I got to do it, but I'll do it tomorrow, which usually comes out about 3 days later, and I eventually do it. But it's just making myself more aware of myself and how I'm acting and how I'm, doing things. I'm not there yet, but I've gotten better, and I've gotten more self-aware and becoming more self-aware to help myself, especially because I took the brunt of a lot of this out of my life for almost 2 years, not being able to cope with the stresses on the job, or, just the, overall daily life stress, or that one call that really set me off, or whatever else. But I'm learning to know, and I'm learning myself that if I do go through those, when I do go through those things that trigger that, incidents, or that trigger that, response, that I know I just need to come home. And I think breathing exercises have probably been the best thing I've ever learned and read about in Scott's book, of course, actually. And I would encourage any of you to buy them, because they are pretty good. And if you like dry sarcasm and sense of humor, it'll hit you right on the head. They're great. So I've connected with all of y'all, and then I realized, hey, I'm not the only one. And hey, you guys have been through it too. And, now I've kind of shifted gears and was like, hey, instead of sulking about myself, why don't I take my experiences and help myself, my agency? And that's what I've been doing. I know I spoke to a bunch of you here at length with that, and that process is in the gathering stage. Like I said, of course, I'm a cop, so I don't like to read, but unfortunately I have to read all this information. And, now being more of a support for the people that have been there. And I've learned that has been actually the biggest help for me, because it not only helps another person, but it also helps me get what's on my chest out. Because sometimes I may have just gone through something, and then I could say, hey, I just went through something like that. Here's how maybe we can deal with it. So that's my story.
Dude, that's amazing. It never shocks me, the openness and courage that everybody in these groups seems to come up with,
Hard to hear you.
Are we there?
Well, that's
That's
better.
better.
I just said, wow. It never seems to amaze me the courage that all of you seem to share at this. And let me start by saying, you're not alone. We are all so messed up, and there's zero chance that you get out of this career without having to deal with trauma. We all deal with it, and I'm absolutely floored at how early in your career that you become so self-aware and have the courage to face it head on. Can you talk about that as far as what point made you self-aware? At what point was it something within you, something that your wife did, and where you had the courage to kind of face that?
I caught the tail end of that, Chris.
You kind of go in and out, Chris. Like when you put your head a certain way, then we can hear you clearly.
Okay, I got rid of the Bluetooth. Is that better?
Much.
100%.
Perfect.
Okay, shoot. Of course, I always mess up this.
Oh, you're
How
good.
courageous of you, bro. The openness and vulnerability everybody comes on here with is so amazing. It's such a humbling experience to be part of this group. And let me tell you that you're not alone. There's zero chance that you're going to get out of this career without having to deal with all this trauma. You're not alone. And I think that part of opening up about these things is because until we open up and we realize that we're around people that are experiencing the same things, we have this great deal of shame. Like we're not good enough. We're not strong enough. And that leads us down this really deep hole. And having a community like this that Sarah and Dave and David and all these folks have made has saved lives by letting everybody know that we're all kind of screwed up. But one question if you can, because I'm really proud of you and I'm super amazed at how early in your career you figured this out. And to that point, let me say that you'll never get there. You're going to spend your entire career as an 18-year guy and still going myself trying to figure it out. And I don't think I'm ever there because you're always going to deal with this stuff. But at what point did you figure out of being self-aware? Is it something that happened to you? Is it something that your wife did? And then what gave you that courage to face it head on, to fight for you and to fight for your marriage and to fight for your career?
It was twofold. And the first one was that when my wife was like, I'm going to leave you. And this is it. Like, this is your last chance. Like, I can't take one more angry outburst. Like, if you do it again, I'm leaving. And then it was also to the point where, well, it's kind of threefold actually, is that I was within my career and I had just got hired with this other agency, my agency I'm with now. And, you know, a year and a half into it, I'm already considering getting back out of law enforcement. And it was like, what am I doing? This is a career that, you know, prior to my IA termination, I loved. You know, it was actually more so, and it was who I was instead of what I did at one point, but I still loved what I did. And then realizing that when I got out of, the thoughts about getting out of law enforcement, and then realizing, like, my wife said, you're not the same person I met. And putting those three things combined and realizing that I'm not the same person my wife first met, the person that she fell in love with. And I want to leave a career field and I want to leave a job that I fought so hard to get back into after a shitty situation. Because of, if you've been a cop longer than 6 months and, if you haven't been an IA, it was the worst experience in my life. And I knew that I had to fight for myself to keep my livelihood. Combining my wife wanting to leave and then my, thoughts of wanting to get out of a career that I love so much and realizing I wasn't the same person that my wife fell in love with was really like that, final straw of I need to do something because I'm going to lose the person I love the most and I'm going to lose my career if I don't.
I'll go. I know that's I mean, obviously life-changing moments of revelation to be able to pick up and move forward. And I'm going to actually go in reverse, which is tend to be my habit here. It's funny. We always say that the job shouldn't define you, and you should be able to pick up and move forward from the job not defining, especially when it comes down to retirement and that final separation. But the job is who we are. And it isn't just a job. You're not a cook. You're not someone who sits in an office and pushes paper all day. We are who we are because of the job, and the job will change you over time. There's no doubt about that. But it's how we allow it to change us, I think, is what's important. And we can either let it change us for the worse, or we can take those experiences and let it change us for the better, to be a better husband, to be a better father, to be a better friend. I think that's why we're all here, to allow us to change for the better based on the experiences that we've had, which I think is why it makes this group so special. And going back to just the foundation of your story, you are, as I said, a true example of what it means to bounce forward. You didn't bounce back, you bounced forward, and you continue to do so. And it's so much fun to watch in the short period of time that I've known you, and the work that you're doing to develop this program for others in your department and down in South Carolina, I think is awesome. And that's why I'm so excited to help you through that process and connect you with people here in New Jersey, because New Jersey doesn't get a lot right. But I think this whole RPO program thing we have going on here and the resiliency training, I think is probably the best of New Jersey for sure. You talked about betrayal. I think that is a common thread throughout not only everybody on this screen, but everybody in this business and everybody in the military side of it as well. I don't think that Sarah has brought on a single storyteller, whether it be this group or another, that hasn't used the B word. And I think it's something important for all of us to be conscious of, because that betrayal is the baseline for so many other emotions. And I think that betrayal is what drives us to not us, cops and military folks, to a self-induced grave for so many that have taken their own life, because it's that betrayal that is so offensive to who we are at a core, because we are so selflessly giving to others. And I think that's something that we need to continue to discuss with each other, to support each other. But I also think it's something that we need to discuss outside of the circle or the Brady Bunch box on the screen, to get everybody else in our circles to understand what that betrayal looks like and to avoid that pitfall at all costs. And when you see yourself dangling on that string, to make sure you get the support, because that betrayal is what kills us. And it's kind of, you had also said about it being in our DNA or being your DNA to that job. That's why we become cops, because it is our DNA. It's who we are. And it goes back to what you said at the end, and the job is a big part of who you are. So don't ever let it define you, but don't ever lose that identity either, because it's important to truly be who you are. But thank you for your vulnerability and coming on and telling your story. It's so important for all of us to hear. And you're an awesome dude, and I look forward to continuing to help you out with the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Ryan for sharing. I'm glad we connected earlier today on LinkedIn. We're a connection. We've been seeing each other a couple of times. And I just want to touch on one thing you said, because I thought this too as a young military police officer when I first started. And it was always, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And I never figured it out. And I know, since you're an avid book reader, there's a book called What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry. He's an MD and a PhD. And he wrote this book, came out this year with Oprah Winfrey, and it talks about how trauma affects the brain. I think we all can understand that. We've been to enough trainings where, you got some neuroscientists with a bunch of graphs and stuff about how trauma affects the brain. his book is primarily talking about how it affects the brain of young children, but we know also that, trauma affects our brain as adults. So, that's another thing about smashing that stigma. It's not that what's wrong with us, it's what happened to us, or what have we seen, or what have we been through. So I applaud you for catching that early in your career, like Chris said, and I wish I had that. It took me decades to figure some things out. So, kudos to you, and again, thanks for sharing your story. But nothing's wrong with you, brother. This is what's happened to you.
Miss Sarah.
Hey, thank you. Gosh, Ryan, I'm so touched by your story. I feel like you were really vulnerable in sharing. I think probably more than anything, I think it's hard for people to share about their marriage and their relationship and how it affects that. And you really went for it. And I just applaud you for having the courage to really just try to figure this out, and just your love for your wife, and definitely rooting for you. And thank you for I feel like we all get to know you better just through you sharing your story. I feel like I know you so much better now after sharing your story. And I think, my big question is, what could those two officers at the beginning of your career, what could they have said to you to get the conversation going? What would it have looked like, do you think? You said something about like a token, just kind of checking in, but what could they have said to get you to open up and unpack that?
So, our job is a brotherhood. It always will be. That's a foundation and a bedrock of which law enforcement is always built on, is that brotherhood. I think looking back on it, while I appreciated the phone calls from the chief to deputy chief to captains to lieutenants, hey, are you okay? Is there anything we can do for you? I think it would have been more beneficial, even the sergeant my sergeant that came to my door unexpectedly to get me out of the house, so I wasn't sitting around in a pair of pajamas and not showering for 3 days, eating ice cream out of the carton, which is my weakness there, ice cream. But pretty much to just, whether it was get the squad as a whole together, or get everybody individually together and debrief and really just take that deep dive into how it affected them, because it, and that face-to-face contact, I think, not just the phone call. I'm fortunate enough now where I'm in an agency where, kind of just another little war story real quick, where I went to a suicide. Ladies looking at me like, are you going to save my husband? I'm, at this point, I've accepted the fact that I was like, this guy's dead, and I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, he's dead. There ain't nothing I can do in the back of my mind. But I put on the show for her and just start doing CPR questions on this guy's chest as a customer service show kind of thing. And that sucks in a sense, but I was at peace with what had already occurred when I got there. I was because I knew what it was. I knew where I was at and knew what I had to do to make this lady feel better. So I was at peace with everything before I even was done with the call. But the example that really stuck out for me from that was my chief at the time got out of his office, came to the squad room when he knew I was back there, and just said, hey, you were on that call, right? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, are you okay? Do you need to talk? Do you need anything? And I said, no, chief, I'm fine. He goes, well, you did a great job. My door's always open. And while that may be the canned, company line, he still took the time to get out of his office, come to the rank and file squad room, and specifically come to me and say, are you okay? Do you need anything? Now, while at the beginning of my career, would I probably have just been like, no, I'm fine, I'm good? If that would have occurred, yeah, probably. But taking that chance to pull me in or pull the team together that was out there and say, hey, let's debrief this. How did you guys feel? How did you guys react? What's going on now? Because I think what really set me off the most about the child death drowning was that the fact that nobody charged the guardian, you know, and being a new cop, I was like, it's all about putting the bad people in jail. It's all about putting the criminal element in jail. To me, that person who was responsible for that child is a criminal, and that criminal element needs to be put in jail. But I mean, the bottom line is, I think it starts from the top down and from the bottom up. We just need to really just put that, you know, hey, come talk to me. Or, hey, let's go park over here behind the warehouse and smoke a cigarette, you know, and not put that, oh, well, we got EAP if you need it, or we're here if you need it, or we got, you know, instead of those company lines, like actually take the deep dive into your people and getting to know your people more than just what they did on the job.
Seems like that comes up, doesn't it? It's the lack of debriefing and how helpful that would be for people. That's all I've got. I just want to pop in with that. That's interesting.
Will?
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hey, Ryan, I am incredibly humbled and inspired by the strength that you show just by being a human. Because, you know, that, at the end of the day, that's what we all are. All the strengths, weaknesses, and passions that come with being a human. For me personally, it's like, how can I be that rock? How can I be that supportive part in my relationship when I'm feeling this vulnerable? You know, when I keep saying, you know, what is wrong with me? And so what I'm thinking is, you know, when you learn the most about a subject, that's when you try and teach it to someone else. And so maybe, you know, to help yourself the most, you need to help someone else get through something similar. So do you think, you know, sharing the stories during a debrief, you know, talking about how they felt, how they dealt with those situations, do you think that would help? And do we have a mandatory debrief after traumatic calls in police forces?
Yeah. Well, Will, actually, I'll fill you in. I think there's a few of you here, at least most of y'all know. I'm actually working on designing a certified lesson plan for my department about wellness and how to handle this and how to debrief it and how to, you know, talk about the trauma and talk about triggers, mental, spiritual wellness. I'm actually incorporating a financial literacy program into that as well, because that is another huge stress that, you know, causes cops to hit the bottle and then pull the trigger on themselves. So, but I mean, it's just, my agency, I'm fortunate now that we are the tip of the spear when it comes to a lot of different things. We just stood up a crisis intervention team to deal with the mental health people that we deal with on the street. I could go ahead and imagine that CIT, crisis intervention teams, also going to start taking on additional responsibilities in the near future about dealing with crisis intervention within the department as well. My department is actually fortunate enough too, where we actually staff an in-house mental health clinician from the county clinician's office as well, who assists us both on the mental health calls that we take for service, because I swear my jurisdiction is the mecca for crazy people, but also helps us as law enforcement. You know, if we need to go talk and just get some stuff out on the table, get some counseling, that person's available as well for us. So,
Brother, you're so spot on that. And just to reemphasize the great work that you're doing. And I would encourage you very much, like Will was saying, what you're doing is normalizing these conversations, and you don't have to wait for anything informal or formal to come about. Start that conversation after those things at your next roll call, saying, hey, I'm kind of jacked up by that one, and this was what happened before when I tried to stuff that stuff. Is anybody else feeling that trauma? Is anybody else experiencing some difficulties? You got that weird feeling in the back of your head and your gut that's kind of making you sick? did you dream about it last night? And just starting those conversations is a big deal. And I can't see all the screen. Does anybody else have any questions for Brother Burke?
Yeah, I just want to tag on to something that Chris just said. When you do those one-off debriefs with an individual in roll call or whatever, if somebody opens up to you and says something to you in those moments or any other moments, the best conversation starter with the most empathy that I've ever come across and used myself is just say, me too. And if someone says something to you that expresses a level of emotion, you just literally take a deep breath and shake your head and go, me too. And the reaction is, really? And like, yeah, I experienced that. And you can give a 30-second version of your experience, and then that person will be diarrhea of the mouth, and it will help them. It'll, help you help them. And it's just a simple me too, because you have been there. So no matter what anybody says to you, you're going to be able to come back with that response. And that has been, I've been on both ends of that. And I just think that simplicity is pretty special.
So spot on. Does anybody else have anything for Brother Burke? So I'm on my phone here trying to screen through here.
I want to throw Scott a bone here. If y'all get a chance, get on Amazon, order his books. They have actually, I like I said in my story, his books have been a kind of was been the jumpstart to me working on my bettering myself. Like I said, I know I can't stand every time I get on this, group and I ask, hey, you have information on this? And usually somebody's like, well, I got a book for you. And I'm like, oh, but I'm going to be that guy for a second. God, I've actually taken your 101 tips, and we cover 2 a day at roll call. And
wow,
it's been my squad's been enjoying it. It's been an eye-opening, some of the stuff in there were like, meh, probably not going to do that. But then the other stuff are like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But if y'all get a chance, Scott Medlin has put together 2 wonderful books that have really jump-started me into my self-healing. So I encourage anybody to check them out. And if you get a chance to connect with him, he'll sign them for you too. So
I was excited to get Scott's books, then I realized he's a loser and doesn't have them on Audible. So I have a hard time signing my iPhone. So got to get those on Audible. Cops don't read.
So
I know. That's why I got that YouTube channel.
and his YouTube channel is awesome as well. If y'all get a chance to tune in. I mean, like I said, I got to give Scott credit where it's due, because he's probably he was the first one to reach out to me on LinkedIn and has really jump started my transition into getting well again with all of this. And he's passionate about it. Dave, I'm not no brilliant thinker. Scott has a great passion about this, and I just would encourage anybody to check out his YouTube, check out his books, because it's done me wonders. So
also the email blast too, if you sign up, you get emails from him as well.
Oh, that reminds me, I need to send an email this week. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.
I do get his emails, and they're always fun to read.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I will leave y'all with this, and I actually said this at one of the last meetings, is that putting all the trauma and everything aside, and I think I mentioned some of this to some of y'all last week, is it was a hell of a year. It was a hell of a year to be a law enforcement officer. It's been a hell of a year to do this job and actually do it with, so much, grace and professionalism, and really getting out a positive influence on the community. And what I mean by that is, we had George Floyd riots, we had the election, we had, Kyle Rittenhouse, we had all these different things, but it was a great opportunity this year to be a law enforcement officer, to be out there with the community and to really support and protect the community during, the First Amendment rights practices with the protests, protection, of the elections, areas within, legal boundaries, things like that. So it was a great opportunity and a great way to really get out and support the community and support our country under the foundational and the constitutional rights that are afforded to us to protect people to be able to exercise their rights. So.
Bro, thank you so much, man. I know I've only known you a short time, man, but I love you like a brother, man. And thank you to everybody that's showed up on this call. The new folks, we're here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Sarah has really set up something special. This is, we like to use the word family or team, but one I like to throw out there's the word tribe. It's an amazing group of people that are selfless. All of our numbers and emails are on the email list. If you want to be on the email list, put it in the chat and Sarah can add you to the weekly distribution because there's a couple other groups that are on there as well. And we're here for you, man. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that the word getting out there that everybody's going to watch is going to not just change people's lives and probably save some people's lives because now they know they're not the only ones. They're not alone. And there's no shame to be had. And it's a normal part of this process in life and this career. So thank you so much for sharing, Ryan.
Thank you, Chris. You're always very motivating. You're one of the most intense people I've ever met.
Well, you're right there, man. You're right there. Your words are inspiring. Your words are impactful. And Sarah's the wheelhouse of this thing. So thank you, Sarah.